Stay with me, because what happened inside that ballroom destroyed a billionaire's perfect image in less than 60 seconds. The sound wasn't loud enough to stop the orchestra, but it was sharp enough to freeze every conversation in the room. A champagne glass slipped from Vivian Monroe's trembling fingers and shattered across the white marble floor just as 300 guests turned toward her at once. Crystals scattered beneath the golden chandelier light like tiny pieces of ice, and for one long, unbearable second, nobody moved. Vivian stood near the center of the ballroom in a dark emerald maternity gown that wrapped carefully around her 7-month pregnant belly, her breathing uneven, one hand gripping the edge of the table beside her as if the entire room had suddenly tilted sideways. Across from her, Damian Crawford slowly lowered his wine glass with the calm expression of a man who believed he controlled every narrative in the room. At 39 years old, Damian had built Crawford Global into a billion-dollar investment empire, and people in Manhattan treated him less like a businessman and more like royalty. Senators shook his hand. Magazines put him on covers. Financial reporters called him the architect of modern American wealth. But none of those people knew what Vivian knew. None of them knew that 20 minutes earlier, she had opened a message that changed everything. The ballroom inside the Grand Regent Hotel glowed with old money elegance. All black tuxedos, polished silver trays, and women wrapped in diamonds that caught the candlelight every time they laughed. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, rain slid down the Manhattan skyline in silver streaks, blurring the city into something cold and distant. The charity gala had been Damian's idea, of course. Everything always was. Every smile, every photo, every carefully staged moment designed to protect the Crawford image. Vivian used to admire that confidence. Now it terrified her. "Vivian," Damian said quietly, his voice smooth enough that nearby guests probably thought he sounded concerned. "You're making a scene." Her pulse hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. The baby shifted suddenly inside her stomach, a sharp flutter beneath her ribs, and instinctively her hand moved lower, protective, grounding herself before she looked back at him. Standing beside Damian was Vanessa Hale, wrapped in a white satin gown that looked more appropriate for a wedding than a charity event. Her blonde hair rested perfectly against one shoulder, and her red lipstick curved into the smallest, almost invisible smile. That smile was what finally broke something inside Vivian. Because Vanessa wasn't nervous. She wasn't ashamed. She looked comfortable, familiar, like she belonged beside him. Then Vivian remembered the message again. The hotel receipt, the private photos, the date stamps from 6 months ago. Her stomach tightened harder than before. 6 months. While she was decorating a nursery in their penthouse overlooking Central Park, Damian had apparently been building another relationship behind closed doors. "You should sit down," Vanessa said softly, her voice coated in fake sympathy. "Stress isn't good for the baby." The room somehow became quieter after that. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Someone near the orchestra lowered their phone. Vivian stared at Vanessa for a long moment, then slowly looked back at her husband. Damian's face remained unreadable, calm in the way powerful men become calm when they think consequences belong to other people. And that was the exact moment Vivian realized something terrifying. Damian Crawford wasn't sorry. He thought she would stay. The orchestra resumed cautiously, but the energy inside the ballroom had changed completely. Conversations became whispers hidden behind champagne glasses and polite smiles. Vivian Monroe could feel it all around her, the silent curiosity of wealthy strangers pretending not to stare while studying every expression on her face. Manhattan society loved nothing more than watching perfect people crack in public. Damian adjusted the cuff of his tailored black tuxedo with slow, controlled movements, the same way he did before investor meetings and television interviews. Calm, precise, untouchable. "You are overwhelmed," he said quietly, stepping closer so only she could hear him. "We can discuss this at home." Home. The word almost made her laugh. Their penthouse suddenly felt less like a marriage and more like a carefully designed museum where she had spent years playing the role of the grateful billionaire wife. Vivian looked past Damian toward the giant ballroom windows where rain streaked down the glass in silver lines. Somewhere below, yellow taxi lights blurred through midtown traffic while reporters and photographers probably still waited outside for pictures of New York's favorite power couple. If only they knew. Vanessa lifted her champagne flute with elegant fingers and tilted her head slightly. "People are watching," she murmured. "Maybe this conversation should happen privately." Vivian noticed the tiny diamond bracelet wrapped around Vanessa's wrist before anything else. Thin platinum, emerald stones, custom setting. Her chest tightened instantly because she recognized it. Last Christmas, Damien had claimed the bracelet was purchased for an international client. Vivian remembered helping him choose the wrapping paper. The memory hit harder than she expected, not because of the bracelet itself, but because of how natural the lie had been. How effortless. Damien followed her eyes for half a second before calmly sliding one hand into his pocket. "Do not do this here," he said. Still calm, still controlled. Vivian suddenly realized something deeply unsettling. Damien was not afraid of losing her. He was afraid of embarrassment. Across the ballroom, cameras flashed as donors continued posing for photos beside giant charity banners covered in Crawford Global logos. The entire event was about public image, and Damien had spent 15 years building his reputation into something almost impossible to challenge. Billionaires did not survive scandals by accident. They survived because they knew how to bury them. "How long?" Vivian finally asked. Her voice came out softer than she intended. Damien exhaled once through his nose. "Vivian." "How long?" she repeated. Vanessa crossed one arm lightly against her waist, watching Damien instead of her now. That was answer enough. The baby shifted again beneath Vivian's gown, stronger. This time, and she pressed her palm gently against her stomach as heat rushed behind her eyes. She refused to cry here. Not in front of donors. Not in front of cameras. Not in front of Vanessa Hale. Damien lowered his voice further. "You are emotional right now. We should leave before this becomes something unnecessary." Unnecessary? Vivian stared at him in disbelief. 7 years of marriage. Endless charity dinners. Business trips. Interviews. Fertility treatments. Quiet nights waiting alone in a $20 million apartment while Damien chased another deal, another acquisition, another headline. And now he called this unnecessary. Somewhere near the back of the ballroom, a waiter accidentally dropped silverware onto the floor. The sharp metallic sound snapped through the silence around them, and several guests turned again. Vanessa leaned closer to Damien slightly, subtle enough to look accidental to everyone except Vivian. Familiar, comfortable, intimate. And suddenly Vivian remembered another detail from the anonymous message sitting inside her phone. Room 2714. The Grand Regent Hotel. 6 months of reservations under a fake corporate account connected to Crawford Global Holdings. The same hotel where Damien had kissed her forehead 3 hours earlier before the gala began. The same hotel where he had apparently been meeting Vanessa all along. Vivian slowly looked up at her husband again, and for the first time since she met him, Damien Crawford looked like a complete stranger. Vivian did not remember leaving the ballroom. One moment she was standing beneath gold chandelier light, surrounded by Manhattan elites pretending not to stare, and the next she was moving through the hotel corridor with the sound of her heels echoing softly against polished marble floors. Somewhere behind her, the orchestra continued playing as if nothing had happened. That was the strange thing about wealthy people. Even when lives fell apart, the music never stopped. Rain hammered against the glass walls overlooking Lexington Avenue, while hotel staff stepped politely aside the moment they recognized Damien Crawford's wife. Vivian pressed the elevator button with shaking fingers and stared at her reflection in the mirrored doors. Her makeup still looked flawless. Her hair still perfectly pinned. Her emerald gown still elegant and expensive. From the outside, she looked like a woman living a dream. Inside, she felt hollow. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. "Vivian." Damien's voice followed her into the private elevator before the doors closed. Calm as always. Controlled as always. He loosened his cufflinks slowly while the elevator descended from the ballroom level, his expression unreadable beneath the cold silver lighting overhead. Vivian folded both arms lightly around her stomach, protective without thinking about it. "Do not touch me," she said quietly when he stepped closer. Damien stopped immediately, not offended, not emotional, simply calculating. "You are overreacting to something you do not fully understand." Vivian laughed once under her breath. Not because anything was funny, but because the sentence sounded rehearsed, like something he had already prepared long before tonight. 6 months, she whispered. "You booked the same hotel suite for 6 months. Damien glanced briefly toward the glowing elevator numbers. 27 floors down. 26. 25. You went through my records? I received them anonymously. That finally caught his attention. Just a flicker. Barely noticeable. But Vivian saw it. Damien Crawford was a man who survived by controlling information, and suddenly there was information moving around outside his control. Who sent them, he asked. Vivian shook her head slowly. Does it matter? The elevator continued descending in silence. Somewhere above them, donors were probably still smiling for cameras beside giant Crawford Global banners, while Vanessa Hale floated through the ballroom pretending to belong there. Vivian suddenly felt exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Like she had spent years holding together a version of her marriage that Damien quietly abandoned a long time ago. The elevator doors opened into the private lobby leading toward the hotel's executive suites. Darkwood walls, gold trim, fresh white orchids arranged beneath soft amber lighting. Everything expensive, everything carefully curated. Damien stepped out first. Vivian noticed how composed he still looked, as though this conversation was simply another corporate inconvenience waiting to be managed. You should get some rest, he said. We can discuss this tomorrow with clear heads. Vivian stared at him in disbelief. Tomorrow? He turned toward her fully now. You are pregnant. Stress is not healthy for you or the baby. The words might have sounded caring to anyone else, but Vivian finally understood Damien's greatest talent. He knew how to sound compassionate without actually feeling it. Her phone vibrated suddenly inside her clutch purse. Damien's eyes shifted instantly toward the sound. Vivian hesitated before pulling it out. Unknown number. One unread message. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. Attached was a single photograph. Damien entering the Grand Regent Hotel 6 weeks earlier with Vanessa beside him, both of them smiling at each other beneath the awning while rain poured across Manhattan streets. Time-stamped. Clear. Undeniable. Beneath the photo was one sentence. He is hiding more than the affair. Vivian looked up slowly from the screen. Damien was watching her now with dangerous stillness, and for the first time all night, something cold moved through her chest. Because suddenly this no longer felt like betrayal alone. It felt like the beginning of something much darker. Damien took one slow step toward her the moment she lowered the phone, and the atmosphere inside the executive lobby shifted instantly. The soft piano music drifting through hidden hotel speakers suddenly felt distant beneath the sound of Vivian's heartbeat pounding in her ears. Rain continued sliding down the giant windows behind him, turning the Manhattan skyline into blurred silver light. Show me the message, Damien said calmly. Too calmly. Vivian tightened her grip around the phone. Why? Because someone is trying to manipulate you. Vivian stared at him for several seconds without answering. Manipulate. That word echoed strangely in her mind, because for the first time in years, she could finally see how carefully Damien chose his language. He never raised his voice, never lost control publicly. He simply redirected every uncomfortable truth until the other person began doubting themselves instead. It was not anger that made him dangerous. It was precision. Was there ever a business trip? She asked quietly. Damien's jaw tightened almost invisibly. What? Chicago, Miami, London. Were any of them real? The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. Damien glanced briefly toward the hallway leading to the executive suites before lowering his voice even further. This conversation does not belong in a hotel lobby. Vivian laughed softly again, but this time the sound broke slightly at the end. You already brought your affair into the hotel. His eyes darkened immediately. Not guilt. Irritation. Like she had crossed some invisible line by saying the truth out loud. For years Vivian had convinced herself Damien's emotional distance came from pressure, responsibility, stress. Billion-dollar companies. Investors. Endless travel. She had defended him to friends who quietly questioned why she always attended events alone. She defended him to herself most of all. But standing here now beneath soft amber lighting with rain covering the windows behind them, she finally saw the truth clearly. Damien Crawford had stopped treating her like a wife long before he started seeing Vanessa Hale. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Vivian opened it before Damien could stop her. This time it was not a photograph. It was a document screenshot. Crawford Global Holdings. Offshore account transfers. Multiple transactions. Millions of dollars moved through shell corporations she had never heard of. At the bottom of the screenshot was one line typed in plain black letters. Ask him about Blackwater Capital. Vivian's stomach tightened hard enough to steal her breath for a second. Damien saw her expression change instantly. Who is sending those? He asked sharply. There it was. The first crack. Tiny, but real. Vivian slowly looked up from the screen. What is Blackwater Capital? Damien's face went completely still. Not confused. Not surprised. Still, like a man calculating risk in real time. Somewhere down the hallway, an elevator chimed softly. Two hotel guests stepped out laughing before immediately going silent the moment they recognized Damien Crawford standing beside his visibly pregnant wife at nearly midnight. The couple quickly disappeared around the corner. Damien reached for Vivian's arm carefully, not aggressive, not rough, but controlled. You are tired, he said, and someone is feeding you selective information. Vivian pulled her arm back before he could touch her fully. Answer the question. The baby shifted sharply beneath her gown again, and she instinctively pressed one hand against her stomach while steadying herself against the marble wall beside her. Damien noticed immediately. His entire tone softened. You need to sit down. Stop pretending this is about my health. Her voice finally cracked then, louder than she intended. The words echoed through the quiet lobby. For the first time all night, Damien looked genuinely unsettled. Not by her pain, by the possibility of losing control over the situation. Vivian suddenly remembered something her older brother Lucas once told her years ago after meeting Damien for the first time. Powerful men do not panic when people hate them. They panic when people stop believing them. The memory hit her so suddenly she almost forgot to breathe. Because Lucas Monroe had never trusted Damien Crawford. Not once. Vivian stepped backward before Damien could say another word and turned toward the hallway leading to the hotel exit. Her breathing felt uneven now, shallow enough that every inhale seemed trapped beneath the pressure building inside her chest. Behind her, Damien followed at a measured pace, not chasing, not emotional, simply refusing to let the situation move beyond his reach. Vivian, he called calmly, do not leave like this. She pressed the elevator button harder than necessary and stared at the glowing numbers above the doors while rain battered the city outside. The baby shifted again beneath her ribs, and she closed her eyes for 1 second, grounding herself against the wave of dizziness moving through her body. She could still smell Vanessa Hale's expensive perfume lingering on Damien's jacket from only minutes earlier. That detail hurt more than she expected. The elevator doors opened. Vivian stepped inside immediately. Damien caught the door before it closed. You should not be alone tonight. That concern would mean more if you had shown it 6 months ago. His jaw flexed slightly. This is exactly why I did not want to discuss this publicly. Vivian stared at him in disbelief. You still think the problem is publicity? For the first time all night, Damien did not answer immediately. The silence between them stretched while the elevator carried them toward the underground parking level beneath the Grand Regent Hotel. Vivian suddenly remembered another night almost 2 years earlier when she had waited alone inside their penthouse during a thunderstorm while Damien canceled dinner for the 3rd anniversary in a row. She remembered sitting beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park with cold pasta on the table and her phone glowing beside her. Damien had texted only 4 words that night. Emergency board meeting tonight. She believed him without question. Now every memory felt contaminated. Every absence. Every late flight. Every unexplained phone call taken behind closed doors. The elevator doors opened into the private garage lined with black luxury vehicles and polished concrete floors reflecting fluorescent light overhead. Damien's driver immediately stepped forward from beside the Escalade, but stopped when he noticed the expression on Vivian's face. Smart enough not to speak. Vivian reached into her purse searching for her keys when her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Another message. This time there was no photo attached. Only an address in Tribeca and a single sentence beneath it. If you want the truth about Blackwater Capital, come alone. Damien noticed the screen instantly. Whoever this is, he said sharply. They are setting you up. Vivian looked at the address again. Tribeca. 3 miles away. Her pulse quickened. How do you know? Damien stepped closer beneath the cold garage lighting, lowering his voice. Because nobody anonymous ever brings good intentions. His answer sounded too fast. Too practiced. Vivian suddenly realized Damien already knew what Blackwater Capital was. More importantly, He knew why someone wanted her to discover it. Before she could speak again, another voice echoed across the garage. I was wondering how long it would take before things started collapsing. Damien turned instantly toward the sound. Vivian froze. Lucas Monroe stepped out from between two black SUVs near the garage entrance, broad shoulders framed beneath a dark charcoal coat, still damp from the rain outside. At 34 years old, Lucas carried himself with the same quiet alertness he had developed during years overseas with the Marines. Controlled posture, sharp green eyes, calm expression that somehow made the entire garage feel smaller the moment he arrived. Damien's face hardened immediately. How did you get down here? Lucas ignored him completely and looked only at his sister. The second his eyes landed on Vivian's face, something cold moved behind his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Like he had been expecting this moment for a very long time. Viv, he said quietly, come stand over here. Damien stepped forward instantly. This is between my wife and me. Lucas finally looked at him then, and the silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. That stopped being true the second you lied to her. Rain thundered faintly above the garage ceiling while Vivian stood frozen between the two men. Then Lucas glanced toward her phone still glowing inside her hand and spoke 5 words that made her blood run cold. You got the messages too, huh? The underground garage fell completely silent except for the distant hum of engines and rain pounding somewhere above the concrete ceiling. Vivian stared at her brother in shock while Damien's expression hardened beside her like polished stone. Lucas kept both hands inside the pockets of his dark coat, calm and motionless. But there was something about the way he watched Damien that immediately made the billionaire look less untouchable than he had upstairs beneath ballroom lights. What messages? Vivian asked quietly. Lucas looked at her phone for 1 second before answering. The anonymous ones. The photos. The account. Transfers. Damien stepped forward instantly. You have been spying on my wife. Lucas finally smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Interesting choice of words coming from someone hiding offshore accounts. Vivian felt the air leave her lungs. Damien's eyes narrowed immediately. You do not know what you are talking about. Actually, Lucas replied calmly. I know exactly what Blackwater Capital is. Vivian looked sharply between them. The fluorescent lights overhead reflected across the polished black Escalade beside Damien, while rainwater dripped slowly from Lucas's coat onto the garage floor. Neither man looked away from the other. Lucas, Vivian whispered, what is happening? Her brother's expression softened the moment he looked back at her. I wanted to tell you months ago. Damien's voice cut through instantly. You do not get to involve yourself in my marriage. Lucas ignored him completely. 3 months ago, my security company was contracted to investigate suspicious financial movement connected to a real estate acquisition in Miami. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, fake holding companies. Blackwater Capital showed up in every transfer. Vivian slowly shook her head, struggling to process the words. I do not understand. You were not supposed to, Damien said sharply. Lucas let out a quiet breath through his nose. There it is. Damien stepped closer now, controlled but visibly tense beneath the garage lights. Careful. Lucas laughed softly at that. You still think intimidation works on everybody. Vivian suddenly realized something deeply unsettling. Damien looked nervous around Lucas. Not angry. Not superior. Careful. And Damien Crawford was never careful with people he considered powerless. Lucas pulled a folded envelope from inside his coat and held it toward Vivian. I was trying to protect you before things exploded publicly. Damien's voice lowered dangerously. Do not open that. Vivian looked down at the envelope in her brother's hand. No label. No markings. Just thick cream paper already softened slightly from the rain outside. Her pulse quickened again. What is in it? Lucas hesitated for the first time all night. Proof. Damien moved immediately then, not aggressively, but fast enough to make Vivian instinctively step backward beside Lucas. The movement alone told her everything. Vivian, Damien said firmly, your brother is taking incomplete information and turning it into paranoia. Then why are you scared of the envelope? The question landed harder than shouting. Damien froze for half a second. Lucas slowly handed the envelope to Vivian without taking his eyes off Damien. Open it when you are somewhere safe. Somewhere safe. The words echoed strangely in her chest. Because for the first time since she married Damien Crawford, Vivian no longer felt safe standing beside her own husband. A black sedan suddenly pulled into the garage entrance, headlights sweeping across concrete walls before stopping near the elevators. Two men in dark suits stepped out immediately, both wearing Crawford Global security badges clipped beneath their jackets. Vivian recognized them from corporate events. Damien had brought security. Lucas noticed too. His expression did not change. That is probably my cue to leave. Vivian looked at Damien in disbelief. You called security on my brother? I called them because this situation is becoming unstable. Lucas shook his head slowly, almost disappointed. Still controlling optics. Damien stepped closer toward Vivian again, lowering his voice into that calm, measured tone he used during television interviews. Come upstairs with me. We will handle this privately. Vivian stared at him for several long seconds while clutching the envelope tightly against her chest. Then she noticed something she had never seen before. Damien Crawford looked afraid. Vivian looked from Damien to the envelope pressed against her chest, while the underground garage seemed to grow colder around them. The two Crawford Global security men remained near the elevator doors pretending not to listen, but their posture made it obvious they were waiting for instructions. Rainwater rolled slowly beneath the tires of parked luxury vehicles, while fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Damien extended one hand toward her carefully, almost gently. Come upstairs, he said again. You are exhausted and people are manipulating you emotionally. Vivian stared at him in silence. For years that voice had worked on her. Calm, reasonable, controlled. Damien always sounded like the smartest person in every room, and slowly over time, she had learned to doubt her own instincts whenever they conflicted with his version of reality. But something had changed tonight. Maybe it was the messages. Maybe it was Vanessa Hale standing beside him upstairs without shame. Or maybe it was the simple fact that her husband looked more concerned about exposure than heartbreak. Lucas stepped slightly closer beside her. Viv, he said quietly, you need to leave with me. Damien's expression hardened immediately. Absolutely not. You do not get to decide that anymore. The two men locked eyes again, and Vivian suddenly remembered being 12 years old watching Lucas stand between her and a group of older boys outside their middle school after one of them made her cry. Same posture, same stillness. Lucas had always protected people quietly, without drama, without speeches. Damien took another controlled breath before speaking again. You are turning a marital issue into something bigger than it is. Lucas gave a short, humorless laugh. Financial fraud is not a marital issue. Vivian's stomach tightened sharply. The baby shifted again beneath her gown, stronger this time, and she pressed one hand instinctively against her side. Damien noticed immediately. His expression changed in an instant. You see, he said, lowering his voice. This stress is affecting her. Vivian looked up slowly. You keep talking about stress like you are not the one causing it. That landed harder than she expected. Damien looked away briefly toward the black Escalade before fixing his expression again. But she saw it now. Tiny cracks beneath the perfect image. Tiny moments where control slipped. Lucas nodded toward the envelope. Open it. Damien stepped forward immediately. Do not. Vivian looked between them one last time before finally sliding her finger beneath the seal. The thick paper opened softly beneath trembling hands. Inside were printed bank records, property transfers, shell, company registrations, and photographs clipped neatly together. Vivian's eyes moved across names and account numbers she did not recognize until one line stopped her completely. Crawford Global Holdings. Pending federal investigation. Her breath caught instantly. What is this? Lucas answered carefully. 6 weeks ago, federal investigators started quietly tracking illegal money movement connected to Blackwater Capital. Damien's jaw tightened. You have no idea what those documents actually mean. Lucas ignored him. The shell corporations trace back to Crawford Global. Vivian flipped to the next page with shaking fingers and suddenly froze. Vanessa Hale's name appeared repeatedly beside offshore transactions worth millions of dollars. Hotel payments, real estate purchases, corporate transfers. Damien saw the page she landed on and moved instantly toward her. Give me the file. Vivian stepped backward before he could reach it. The movement was small, but it changed everything. Because Damien stopped immediately the second he realized she was afraid of him now. Real fear flickered across his face for the first time all night. Not fear of losing his company. Fear of losing control over her. The garage fell silent again except for distant thunder outside. Then Vivian looked down at the final photograph clipped inside the envelope and felt her entire body go cold. Damien and Vanessa were seated together at a private restaurant terrace in Miami 3 months earlier, smiling beside two older men Vivian recognized instantly from financial news channels. One of them had been indicted for corporate fraud the previous year. At the bottom of the photo, someone had handwritten 6 words in black ink. She was never just the mistress. Vivian could hear her own heartbeat now. Slow, heavy, unsteady beneath the cold fluorescent lights of the underground garage. Her fingers tightened around the documents while Damien stared at the photograph still visible inside the open envelope. For the first time since she met him, the billionaire standing in front of her no longer looked untouchable. He looked cornered. "You do not understand what you are reading," Damien said carefully. Every word measured, controlled. But the confidence underneath his voice had started cracking around the edges. Lucas folded his arms across his chest beside her. Actually, she understands exactly enough. The two Crawford Global Security men remained near the elevators in tense silence, clearly unsure whether this was still a private marital dispute or something much larger. Rain echoed faintly through the parking structure while distant thunder rolled above Manhattan streets. Vivian looked down at the documents again. Offshore accounts. Federal inquiries. Vanessa Hale connected to corporate transfers worth millions of dollars. And beneath everything, Damien's name repeated over and over like a shadow she could no longer escape. Was any of it real? She asked quietly without looking up. Damien's expression shifted slightly. What? Our marriage? The question landed harder than the accusations. For 1 second, Damien actually looked caught off guard. Vivian finally raised her eyes toward him, and suddenly memories began crashing into each other inside her mind. Their wedding overlooking the Hudson River at sunset. Damien kissing her forehead after their first miscarriage 3 years earlier. The nursery they painted together only 2 months ago in soft cream colors because Damien said neutral tones looked timeless. She had believed all of it. Every careful gesture. Every promise. Damien stepped toward her again slowly. Vivian, listen to me. She flinched before he even touched her. The movement was small, almost invisible, but everyone saw it. Damien froze immediately. Lucas's jaw tightened beside her while the security men exchanged uncomfortable glances near the elevators. Silence flooded the garage again, because in that tiny instinctive movement, something inside the marriage officially died. Damien lowered his hand slowly. I never wanted this to happen like this. Vivian let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like disbelief. Then how exactly did you want it to happen? He did not answer. Lucas pulled his phone from his coat pocket and glanced briefly at the screen before looking directly at Damien again. You might want to check financial news in the next 10 minutes. Something cold moved across Damien's face instantly. He reached for his own phone at once, unlocking the screen with visible tension now. Vivian watched the exact moment his expression changed completely. A breaking news notification flashed across the screen bright enough for her to read from several feet away. Federal investigation expands into Crawford Global Financial Operations. Damien stared at the headline without moving. Another alert appeared immediately after. Then another. Business networks, financial reporters, market analysts. One by one, the notifications began flooding his phone faster than he could open them. Vivian suddenly understood something terrifying. The story was already out. Somewhere above them inside the Grand Regent Ballroom, donors and investors were probably checking their phones right now beneath giant Crawford Global banners, while reporters raced toward the hotel entrance in the rain. Damien looked up sharply toward Lucas. You leaked this. Lucas shook his head calmly. No, somebody inside your company did. Damien's composure cracked completely for the first time all night. Not loudly, not dramatically, but visibly. The billionaire who controlled boardrooms, politicians, and billion-dollar negotiations suddenly looked like a man watching the walls close around him in real time. Vivian's phone buzzed again inside her hand. Another anonymous message. She opened it slowly while Damien watched her with exhausted eyes now stripped of certainty. The message contained only one sentence. Check the nursery camera footage from Tuesday night. Vivian frowned instantly. What nursery footage? Damien's face lost all color. Vivian stared at Damien while cold dread moved slowly through her chest. Around them, the underground garage suddenly felt impossibly quiet, as if even the rain above Manhattan had paused to listen. Damien's face remained pale beneath the fluorescent lights, and for the first time all night, he looked like a man who no longer knew which disaster to stop first. "What footage?" Vivian repeated softly. Damien swallowed once before answering. "It is nothing." Lucas immediately stepped closer beside her. "That is not the face of a man talking about nothing." Another notification flashed across Damien's phone. Crawford Global stock drops 12% after federal inquiry leaks. The billionaire barely looked at it now. His attention remained locked on Vivian. "We should go home," he said carefully. "Now." Vivian almost laughed at the word home again. The penthouse overlooking Central Park no longer felt like home. It felt like a stage where she had unknowingly played the loyal wife while secrets moved behind closed doors. Her phone buzzed once more. Same unknown number. Another message appeared beneath the last one. He deleted most of the footage. Not all of it. Vivian's pulse quickened instantly. "Lucas," she whispered, "what does this mean?" Her brother's expression darkened slightly. "It means somebody inside that penthouse wanted you to see something." Damien shook his head immediately. "This is insane." But his voice lacked conviction now. Vivian noticed it instantly. Tiny cracks spreading wider beneath the polished billionaire image she once trusted completely. She looked at him for several long seconds before finally asking the question that mattered most. "What happened Tuesday night?" Damien exhaled slowly through his nose. "Vanessa came over to discuss business." Lucas gave him a flat stare. "At your nursery?" Silence. Damien looked away first. That alone felt like an answer. Vivian suddenly remembered Tuesday night clearly now. Damien had insisted she spend the evening at a prenatal spa on the Upper East Side because he claimed she needed to relax before the gala fundraiser. When she returned home after 10 o'clock, he had already fallen asleep in the guest bedroom, claiming he was exhausted from conference calls overseas. At the time, she thought nothing of it. Now every memory felt poisoned. "You brought her into our home," Vivian whispered. Damien stepped toward her again, desperation finally slipping through his calm corporate mask. "Nothing happened that affects you or the baby." Lucas let out a cold breath beside her. "You really still think this is only about the affair?" The security men near the elevators quietly stepped farther back now, clearly understanding they were witnessing something much larger than corporate scandal. Somewhere above them, reporters were probably flooding the hotel entrance while investors panicked across Manhattan trading floors. Damien Crawford's empire was collapsing floor by floor in real time. And yet the thing that terrified him most stood right here in front of him, holding a phone and a paper envelope. Vivian slowly closed the file against her chest and looked directly into her husband's eyes one final time. "Did you ever love me?" The question echoed softly through the garage. Damien opened his mouth immediately, but no words came out.